Hey guys, I'm your host Matt, and we're here to talk about the Dolphins versus the Packers on the Matt Newton Football Show. Now, the Dolphins had a 30-17 gut-wrenching loss to the Green Bay Packers, and it was disappointing for the team and its fans. On the one hand, the Dolphins came in there with the intention of crushing narratives that they can't beat good teams on the road and they can't win in 40-degree temperature or less. The Dolphins failed on both fronts, and it just fed into the narrative even more that the Dolphins can't win in those conditions. Now, the Dolphins started out the game pretty good on defense. They had a 3-and-out versus the Packers and forced them to punt on their first possession. But after that, things quickly went downhill for the Dolphins as Malik Washington muffed a punt deep in his own territory, which allowed the Packers to get the ball back and score on that second drive of the game. So the Dolphins really started off 7-0 in that game, and it was basically a sign of things to come. The offense and the defense really couldn't work together to play complementary football, and as a result of that, they went into the half with a 24-3 deficit. And, for a Dolphin team that came into the season with so much promise, and also before this game talked about how many narratives they wanted to crush, this was just a disappointing showing for the team. On offense, they really couldn't get it together. They had problems with protection, problems with running the ball, problems with completing passes, problems with getting open. So it was just an all-around, just untenable spot for the Dolphins offense in order to be productive in the first half of the game. In the second half of the game, things turned around a bit, but it was far short from what they needed to be a competitive team on the road. And, at the end of the game, it seemed like fans try to point fingers as to who was responsible for the loss. Some people thought it was the defense. Some people thought it was the special teams. Some people thought it was the offense. But at the end of the day, all three units have to play complementary football in order for them to win a game like this, especially against a good team on the road. And when your special teams puts the defense in a very unfavorable position to start off the game and you're down 7-0, then it changes the complexion of the game somewhat. And the Dolphins on offense, they weren't able to sustain drives well enough to put touchdowns on the board to keep up with the Packers. That's what you would hope for if you're the Dolphin fan. But the Dolphins couldn't get it done on offense. As a matter of fact, in the first half, late in the first half, they had an opportunity to put up maybe a field goal, perhaps a touchdown when they were down 21-3. But a couple of errant throws by Tua Tagovailoa forced the Dolphins to go 4-and-out, turnover and downs. And then the Packers got the ball back, went down the field, and they were able to convert a field goal to make the score 24-3. So this is not complementary football. The special teams isn't helping the defense. The defense isn't helping the offense. The offense isn't helping the defense. So all of these units have combined to really let this team down and its fans in this game on Thursday. And for the Dolphins, is a question as to whether they can still keep the hope alive for making the playoffs. And at 5-7, mathematically, I guess they do have a chance. But at the end of the day, even if the Dolphins were to make the playoffs, I don't think most people can envision this team going on the road and beating a good team, especially if they're playing a team like Kansas City or Buffalo, where they'd have to face those same conditions, maybe below 40 degrees. A good team on the road is just not a matchup the Dolphins favor at this particular point in time. Some of it has to do with the build of the team. People point to Chris Greer and say, hey, well, Chris Greer didn't do a good enough job building this team. And, some of it is also a reflection on Mike McDaniel, how he plans to coach offense for the team. And there was even whispers in the preseason about the Dolphins being a soft team, that if you punch them in the mouth, then they'll fold. Jordan Poyer said that in the preseason. Jordan Brooks came out and said that they wanted to dispel that notion. Jalen Ramsey said that they wanted to be bullies. But even with all this talk, the Dolphins ended up being the exact same team that they had been over the last few years, particularly with Mike McDaniel as the head coach. So has anything really changed in terms of whether they can be a kind of team that will win deep into the playoffs in January when it matters? It doesn't seem that way. The Dolphins certainly haven't proven it at this point in time. Can they change it around at some point? Obviously, but there would have to be probably a shift philosophically from the front office to the coaching staff on how this team is built and what type of team they would like to be. Over in San Diego, you had a coach in Jim Harbaugh who came in and decided that they didn't want to be a finesse team anymore. They wanted to invest in their offensive line. They wanted to retain some of their defensive line players. And they also got rid of some of their skill players that were overpriced, guys like Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, and Mike Williams. They got rid of those guys. They got cheaper on offense at the skill positions. And they just wanted to change the identity of the team to be a team that wants to be aggressive on both sides of the ball and be a physical team as well. The Dolphins need a shift in philosophy similar to that. I'm not saying that they should be the Chargers. I'm not saying they should be Jim Harbaugh, but that kind of philosophical shift where you can get rid of some of these finesse players and embody a more physical brand of football. The Chiefs did the same thing when they traded away Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins. They ended up becoming a more physical team, a more defensive team, a team that plays physical brand of football on both sides of the ball. So philosophically, the Dolphins have to figure out how they can win in the AFC East. And deep in the playoffs, you're more likely to find teams that are playing December, January type football than guys who are playing September football. In the winter months, obviously the weather changes. And if you're playing in an outdoor venue and you're not playing at home in Miami, it'll be a challenge to play the brand of football that the Dolphins would like to play, at least the way the team is currently built. And to be honest with you, I mean, this build has been going on for a long time. There will be periods of time in the past where the Dolphins have tried to be physical. Tony Sperano's Dolphins tried to be physical under Bill Parcells. Jimmy Johnson's Dolphins tried to be physical, getting rid of some of the wide receivers, trying to get a good running game and being a more physical team on both sides of the ball. It didn't work out. They didn't really have the talent to really win in the postseason. So the Dolphins have tried this physical brand of football build a couple of times from their former coaches. But for the most part, the other coaches who've been here, whether it was Cam Cameron, whether it was Joe Philbin, Adam Gase, Mike McDaniel, to a lesser degree, even Brian Flores, this team has always tried to be more of a finesse type of offense. And, I'm not sure if that wins in the AFC East. Perhaps if the Dolphins were in another division, like the AFC South, maybe they'd have a chance of playing that type of style of football because the road teams that you're playing is not playing in the Northeast. So maybe that would have been a thing. But the fact of the matter is the Dolphins still playing the AFC East. You still have to play an aggressive brand of football in your own division. And also when you play against out-of-division opponents in the AFC that play in outdoor venues, the Dolphins have to be better. And I'm not sure if this current build is the way to do it. I've been talking about that. If you've been watching my channel, you've seen that I've talked about the Dolphins' physicality all off season, particularly in the preseason before training camp came around. And, I haven't seen anything to dispel the Dolphins being a physical team that can win in the playoffs. So the Dolphins have to figure out who they are. That most likely comes from Stephen Ross. He has to decide what type of team he wants built. If he puts it in the hands of Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel, we know Mike McDaniel received an extension this offseason. Not really sure about Chris Greer. It hadn't been announced, but it's most likely those two guys are probably have similar contracts in terms of, the length of their contracts. So I would venture to think that Chris Greer may have gotten an extension as well. But regardless, those two guys, at least as of right now, are tied at the hip. So if the Dolphins want to go in a different direction, away from Mike McDaniel, chances are they might have to get rid of Chris Greer too. But it's also possible that the Dolphins retain Chris Greer and have him find another coach who can embody the physical brand of football that the Dolphins need to win in January, in December, and also into the postseason. So that's up to Stephen Ross. None of the fans or anything else will make that decision. Stephen Ross has to see what the vision for his team is going to be, and he has to put someone in charge to fulfill that vision. As of right now, the Dolphins have a team that's built to beat bad, mediocre teams, but against good teams and great teams, they certainly have had their struggles. So we'll see if they can change that narrative into the future. So that's it for this video. Leave a comment, subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.